Councilmember Miller,
I'm still here.
Councilmember Kelly, Councilmember Best,
Here.
Councilmember Mendoza,
Here.
Councilmember Lane,
Absent.
Absent.
Vice Mayor Turner,
Absent.
and Mayor Croft.
Present. Okay, let's go on to the study session, Tuesday, May 15th, 2018. Call to order, we've done call to order, we've done roll call. The first item is presentation by water consultant Mark Holmes and discussion regarding long-term storage credits and access to town's water portfolio. And we'll have Mr. Marbury and Mr. Holmes, which we haven't seen in a while. Glad to see you here, Mark.
Mayor Croft, members of the council, it's a pleasure to be here. And just for the record, I'm Mark Holmes, your water resources consultant. I am a local boy, live out in Paulden. So I'm grateful to be here.
Can't be all bad.
So my proposed agenda will include a brief discussion of the water resources types and the availability. I will also discuss tonight how the town is creating long-term storage credits and banking these renewable water supplies. And also I'll touch on reclaimed water ownership and banked reclaimed water. And I believe it worthy to touch on the town ordinances regarding access to the water resource portfolio. And then leave you with some considerations and recommendations for some policy discussions for the future. So during the presentation, I may refer to recycled water, effluent, or reclaimed water. All those terms mean the same thing in the context of this presentation. I'll also probably use wastewater, which is just for this presentation. It has various definitions, but for this presentation, it's water. It's in the collection system of the sewer. It's not yet been treated. And I'll also refer to the volumes of water as an acre foot, which is an acre of land 1 foot deep of water, or a little over 325,000 gallons, or enough water to serve 3.5 to 4.5 homes in a year. And by all means, stop me anytime if you have questions. Happy to. This is a work session, so happy to address any questions with any slide. So within the Prescott active management area, there's really just two basic types of water supplies, renewable and non-renewable. Renewable water supplies mean the water supplies are renewed on an annual basis, and they include surface water, which Chino Valley does not have an allocation of at this time. Also considered a renewable supply is your reclaimed water. The town is currently creating this renewable supply through its collection, treatment, and recharge system, or I'll refer to that as a CTR system, whereby wastewater is collected and treated at the Old Home Manor Reclamation Facility, and then it is then shipped to the Old Home Manor Reclamation Facility where it's recharged, percolated back into the ground, and recharged back to the aquifer. And that system will grow with time. As the town grows, as the sewer collection and treatment system grows, that volume of water will ever increase as the town continues to grow that system. So it is an ever increasing volume of renewable supplies for the town. The other type of water supply within the Prescott active management area is your non-renewable or groundwater. It is a finite quantity of water. Currently the town has various quantities of the non-renewable groundwater through various type rights. At some point in the future, we'll probably sit down and talk more about those types of water rights, groundwater rights. But the main point is when they're all allocated and done. It's not an ever increasing there, it's a finite amount. So banking water in Arizona, it really started in the late 1980s when laws were created for the purpose of trying to sponsor and promote and encourage recharging water back into the ground if it was being recovered or pumped out. There's only 3 types that are legally recognized to be recharged into the aquifer. One of those is the Central Arizona Project water. The other is in-state surface water supplies, and lastly, reclaimed water. Again, the town is currently collecting, treating, and recharging reclaimed water, so you do have one of the supplies that is acknowledged by the Department of Water Resources, and you are gaining credits. So currently, Chino Valley is treating about 297 acre feet, nearly 96.7 million gallons of wastewater per year at the Old Home Manor Reclamation Facility, and that's the picture on the left there. That's the reclamation facility at Old Home Manor. And about 284 acre feet per year, or 92.5 million gallons of water, are being sent to the recharge facility and then percolated back to the aquifer. And you're banking that water. It's like a bank account. When that water gets back to the aquifer, you can actually then the Department of Water Resources issues you a statement every year that you've banked X number of acre feet, and it's now water you have the use of for the future or for assured water supply purposes, and we'll touch more on that. Just want to talk briefly on who owns that water. So there was a very large state Supreme Court case. It was Arizona Public Service Company versus John F. Long. Happened in 1989 when that case, when their APS stopped sending reclaimed water down a river, and another downstream user was using that water, and they claimed that it was their water right. But the law was quite clear that whoever generates and treats wastewater and produces reclaimed water, it is your ownership of that water right, and no one can really take it away. That was the court's findings. So even if you're not the water provider, so if in many areas in Chino Valley, you're just a sewer provider, and it could be an area that you're sewering that is being provided water through, say, City of Prescott. And even though the City of Prescott is the potable water provider, you're the reclaimed water provider. You are actually collecting the wastewater and treating it and recharging it. So the ownership is clear and distinctive under state law. You're the owner of that reclaimed water, so no one can take that away. So touching on some of the town ordinances, I think worthy to spend a little bit of time on. The town ordinance 51.040. The town at its discretion may make its water, which is either the water rights you have, those could be groundwater rights, or effluent rights, and credits available for purchase by developers submitting a preliminary subdivision plat. The purchased water rights shall be utilized only for the platted subdivision and may not be sold or transferred without the town's express written permission. So right there, the town has discretion. It may make its water effluent or other rights available. Town Code 51.035, commercial water credits. So non-residential commercial water users may lease water credits from the town's water portfolio, provided that such developments allocate at least 75% of the square footage for retail sale tenants, and provided the sewer collection services are available within 400 feet of the property line or scheduled to be constructed within 5 years. The entire commercial development shall be required to connect to the CTR system, pay all fees, and satisfy additional conditions as approved by the town. Town Code 51.036, residential assured water supply. So all new residential subdivisions shall demonstrate to the satisfaction of the town an application has been submitted to the Arizona Department of Water Resources, or ADWR, for a 100-year assured water supply for any new development in the Prescott Active Management Area, with the filing for a preliminary plat. Approval with the town. The 100-year assured water supply certificate issued by ADWR shall be submitted with the final plat application. So at the point of preliminary plat, they're going to be applying for a certificate of assured water supply with the state. At the time of final plat, they should have that certificate issued. Just want to note that these certificates are issued as part of the state process, can take short of a year. Sometimes if the conditions are a little more complicated, it can take over a year. So that should be, when your development services is discussing that with development, they've got to apply for a certificate. It may take a long time, a year or more in some instances. Town Code 51.037, development and allocation of water credits. So an allocation of water credits to development from the town's water portfolio will only be considered using the following minimum criteria. Additional conditions may be required by the town. Criteria A, the development must provide a water budget that meets or exceeds the water use and water conservation goals of the Arizona Department of Water Resources Third Management Plan for the Prescott Active Management Area. That plan was developed for the years 2000 and 2010. The state has not yet issued a fourth management plan, so we're still governed by the third management plan. They're working on the fourth right now. Requirement B, the development shall participate in the town's CTR program and be able to participate with it, or be able to participate in 5-year per the town's then current and adopted capital improvement plan at the town's discretion, and construct dry services laterals and wastewater collection main lines. So if the capital improvement plan is not going to be scheduled for 5 years, they still have a requirement, get those lines in place within that certain time period. So when the sewer main is constructed, the two can tie together. Requirement C, the development shall pay the effluent CTR system buy-in fees according to the then adopted fee schedules. And D, the development shall pay a water portfolio access fee according to the then adopted fee schedule. And we'll touch on those in just a second. And then E is the initial water portfolio access fee shall be paid at the rate set by the council resolution per acre foot for a 100-year assured water supply. The town council may adjust the rate from time to time by resolution. So a 1 acre foot assured water supply is 1 acre foot every year for 100 years. So in essence, a 1 acre foot assurance of a water supply is a block of 100 acre feet of water. 1 acre foot every year for 100 years. So when someone's development's accessing the town's portfolio, they're buying 1 acre foot for a year for 100 years, so it's 100 acre feet they're actually buying. So these are important. Resolution number 05-763. The town set the rate of $25,000 per acre foot for accessing the town's water portfolio for a 100-year assured water supply within the Prescott Active Management Area. So this would be water supplies you currently own and control. These could be reclaimed water credits that you currently are banking. It could be retired irrigation grandfathered rights that were existed on Old Home Manor, have been extinguished, or other water rights the town has at this point. But $25,000 for water rights within the Prescott Active Management Area. Resolution number 06-801. The town set the rate of $45,000 per acre foot for accessing the town's water portfolio for a 100-year assured water supply for water outside the Prescott Active Management Area. This would be water supplies that are part of the wine glass acres. The historically irrigated acres the town has purchased in time, those acres are as a water supply that actually can be imported in the Prescott Active Management Area. So the rate for that water is $45,000. Those were prices that were set in line with capital projects to import water supplies or to make other water supplies available. Requirement number F, the development shall construct, as approved by the town engineer and public works director, a central water delivery system, including production and storage as required at their own expense, which ownership shall transfer to the town of Chino Valley at no cost to the town at the final acceptance of the development infrastructure or at a date negotiated by the developer and the town at the time of request for development. Requirement G, development shall provide to the town's satisfaction the financial capabilities and assurances to complete the development in a timely manner as approved by the town of Chino Valley. I think we're nearing the last of the ordinances. Last ordinance, Town Ordinance 51.038, development non-performance and forfeiture of water rights. So once a development has received a water allocation from the town water portfolio, the developer shall perform as per the development agreement. If the developer does not perform as per the development agreement and begin construction within 2 years, the developer's town water allocation shall be forfeited and no fees shall be refunded. So touching on some conclusions. The town is creating an assured water supply through the CTR, the Collection, Treatment, and Recharge System, and should continue to bank its reclaimed water supplies. Again, this is your ever-increasing, ever-growing renewable water supply. I would recommend continue that process. The town, at its discretion, may make water available, certain assured water supplies, i.e. effluent water credits, for purchase or lease for residential or non-residential development. But currently, there is no criteria that clarifies who qualifies for access to the town's water portfolio. So who should qualify for that? Number 3, certain requirements must be met if a development is granted access to the city's water portfolio, or they'll forfeit those that access to the water portfolio, and then development must perform in accordance with the town's timeframes or risk the forfeiture. So I want to leave you some recommendations and hopefully some discussion. Number 1, the town may want to consider establishing a development criteria of who it would prefer accessing its portfolio. That could be done through review of the general plan, strategic, economic, or development plans, looking at Old Home Manor development planning, looking at jobs, job creation centers, tax base, positive impact in the town. You could also look at promoting water users that would come to the town that discharge most of their water back to the CTR system, so you can actually recycle that water over and over again, and discourage those water users that actually consume most of the water and discharge very little water back to the CTR system. So you're getting very little water back. Number 2, the town has established a per acre foot water portfolio access fee in 2004 and 2005, which were pre-recession. You may want to examine if these prices are still in line with the capital improvement plans of the town today. And number 3, encourage economic development and development services departments to discuss the establishment of a criteria of who would get access to water with the council via work session, or it could be through a mini retreat or a retreat, and develop a new policy. And 4, the town may want to consider creating increased water efficiencies or enhanced water conservation that would allow the very limited water supplies you have to be stretched much further. In fact, one of the certificates issued in Chino Valley before I left the town received 8.5 homes per acre foot, so very efficient development. Number 5, benefits of expanding your sewer connections. The town can increase the reclaimed volume of renewable water supplies, can also mitigate pumping and groundwater level drops, which are occurring every year due to overdrafting, and creates longevity with current well depths and better aquifer management. The town could also increase the health and safety of the aquifer and avoid future potential aquifer protection violations, which have occurred in the past with increased density of septic systems. Also may improve aquifer water quality and may increase land value, especially where high density development is being planned or large industrial commercial entities need sewer discharge. And lastly, benefits of importing your historically irrigated acres, your HIA water supplies. Hope to cover that more in the future, but I did mention it here. It requires new development to connect to the CTR system. So you're actually importing water from outside the Prescott Active Management Area. You get that water as wastewater, treat it, you can either recharge it, increase your renewable supplies here, or look at how you want to manage that water supply. And importing water will not only provide a new vital assured water supply, but could increase the volume of reclaimed water supplies for the town and provide flexibility. And with that, happily address any questions or have discussion you'd like.
I do have some. Do we have an idea how much water that we're pumping per year versus our recharge on the wells that we have?
Do you remember the number, Frank?
Anybody?
I'm not sure the exact number, but I know we're pumping, I think we're treating a little bit more than we're actually pumping right now. They're pretty close in numbers, so that 297 acre feet is pretty close to what we're pumping because we actually treat water from multiple water companies.
So then that's not a burden on our water portfolio, as you call it right now, or our bank. We're maintaining the same amount, then we're not gaining, is what I'm asking.
Well, it maybe Mark can explain this, but I don't think they actually consider, it's strange, but they don't consider the amount of pumping water you're pumping out of the wells. It's the certificates with development that go into it. Is that right? If you want to explain that.
Sure. So as Frank mentioned, so the volume of water being pumped, whether it's the town pumping the water or it's, say, City of Prescott or a private utility. Some of that water is going through houses and we're getting the sewer, the wastewater, and we're treating that. We're getting the water back to the ground. We're gaining credits from another water provider service area.
Gotcha.
Now, developments that are classified as a subdivision, to Frank's point, 6 or more units to be sold. So you may have a subdivision of 500 units to be sold. Requires a certificate of assured water supply. So they have to prove there's water physically, continuously, and legally available for 100 years. So either through the town's access to some of the water supplies that you have to either allow them access to some of the water supplies or through another water provider, they would have to get a certificate and show that there's going to be water there for 100 years. So, vis-a-vis it's the town or it's the City of Prescott or it's private utility. But pumping overall, pumping is, think of it holistically, that aggregatedly, whether it's Prescott pumping or Chino Valley pumping or private, we're all pumping from the same bowl, the same aquifer. We're the only entity putting water back into the same area where we're pumping from. Prescott is not putting water back in where it's pumping from, and the other utilities are primarily, they're not having their reclamation facilities, they're putting water into septic systems, private septic systems,
Right.
which really, unless you have 6 to 8 homes or septics per acre, you get the densities to actually get some of that water back to the ground, but that causes aquifer contamination issues. So the goal is centralized wastewater treatment, and then a recharge facility that's centralized. You can put water back, and then hopefully have your wells in proximity to that big mound of water you have underground. Did I answer your question?
You did.
Okay.
You did. And then the other question I had was on the 100-year water supply, assured water supply. So if you're going to do say a 50-home subdivision, and your rule is you said 4 to 5 homes per acre foot.
On average, 3.5 to 4.5 on average. Status quo, we'll call it.
Let's say 5 because it makes the math easy.
Sure.
So that's
Stop it.
so that's 100 acre feet for the year, right? For 500 homes.
So, I'm sorry, what was the size of the subdivision?
500 homes. Say.
Okay,
Or
yeah.
we'll do 50. It's easier, yeah.
Yeah.
So that's 10 acre feet per home.
Correct. 10 acre feet for 100 years. So
For a per
10
for
acre
100
feet
years.
times 100, you've got to prove that complete volume
So
from the
it's-
get-go versus 10 acre feet every year for 100 years. You've got to show that entire volume is available.
Okay, and then whoever the developer is going to pay for the 10 acre feet at the 25,000. I can't remember what it was.
Correct. 25,000 for water within the active management area.
For the whole 100 years.
Correct.
Oh, so he would be paying.
25,000 for a 100 acre foot block of water, which is 1 acre foot per year for 100 years. So we call it 1 acre foot, and this gets a little confusing. The 1 acre foot is 25,000 acre foot. So think of it this way: 25,000 for 100 block acre feet that's 1 acre foot for 100 years, or it's $250 per acre foot for that entire 100 block of acre feet. So it's in total $25,000. And that's fairly close to the current marketplace price throughout the state is between $250 to $300 per acre foot for water brokerage out throughout different water brokerages in the state. If you want to buy 1 acre foot, just simply 1 acre foot, it's between $250 and $300. But again, they're getting a 100 block, so that's $25,000.
Got it. Yeah,
And
I do
if
got
it's-
it.
The HIA waters was priced much higher at the time because the infrastructure to get that water to the town is going to take substantial capital projects.
Okay. That's all I
Mayor
got.
Croft.
Yeah, are you saying Prescott's pumping water out and they're not returning it to the aquifer?
That's correct.
Where's their water going to? Or the effluents going to?
So they have a recharge facility, but it's right
Mhm.
near their community, which
That's-
is not really with, I'll say, hydrologic connectivity with where we're pumping and they're pumping the water from. The travel time, if it were the molecules were to make it from that recharge facility to where they're pumping, might be several thousand years.
Yeah.
If it actually makes it, I would say chances are there's no connection.
Wow.
So that's why this area of the water table is dropping,
Dropping.
2.5, 3, 4. In some areas it fluctuates, but we're continuing to see the water table drop here because we're
Can they
overdrafting.
use that influence for assured water supply for Prescott?
They do. It's actually, they're a different type of assured water supply than the town is. They're a designated provider.
Yeah.
They're the only entity in the Prescott AMA that's a designated provider, which means that the city of Prescott has looked at their entire water portfolio with the state, and they said, here's what we have for renewable supplies, our non-renewables, and the state makes basically a decision and order on all their water supplies and says, okay, this is what we're going to allow you to have. So what gives them the advantage for that is by becoming designated, and they've done it citywide, they work with developers, and the developers now have to go to the state of Arizona and get a certificate because the city's considered already a certificated city. And then development plugs into where their development plans and their general plan specify. And they're using their portfolio, giving them access. They still may pay fees and so forth, but they've designated their entire city as an assured water supply.
The town manager of Prescott Valley says they got a huge aquifer under them, and that's how they're assuring a water supply for all the building they're doing. Is that a dream, or is that true?
Well, I know they moved their wells. They used to have their wells in the upper Agua Fria sub-basin, which is a very small. They moved them into the little Chino sub-basin, which does provide more water. But again, when there's, I think it's 2.5 to 1, we're overdrafting the aquifer.
Yeah.
So the water table will continue to drop. If you talk to the folks on the west side of Chino, where their wells have gone permanently dry, they probably would disagree with the city manager for Prescott Valley, town manager for Prescott Valley. There are some deep areas of aquifer. It's very dynamic. The geologic environment of the aquifer is, some areas have quite a bit of water, some areas have very limited water. Down by the airport, it's very limited. There's a number of geologic phenomenon, but overall, we've got to try and manage the aquifer a little bit better and try and put more water back into it. But everybody's pumping from this little Chino, including all the privates, the municipals, all the municipals, and Prescott as well, and they're delivering that water to their customers. But we're the only one putting water back into this aquifer region. So again, we can help better manage by putting our wells close to that big mound of water that's underneath Old Home Manor. If our wells, like the Yavapai College well that's in that vicinity, that's probably enjoying relief from the aquifer, from that big mound of water right there in close proximity.
Thank you.
Thanks.
As we have developers developing downstream of our treatment plant, we're requiring package plants, treatment plants. How many of those plants, or is there different types of plants that some of them recharge and some of them don't? Is that
So what
accurate?
actually you can recharge from a package plant. It all comes down to the Arizona Department of Environmental Quality. They issue what's called an aquifer protection permit. They look at the water quality that you're creating from a package plant or your reclamation facility. They look at various components, and you can apply for an aquifer protection permit, and it is required if you intend to recharge water. And they are obtainable, and package plants in the state are recharging water. So you can recharge water from a package plant, just requires permits. Now and I'll say most package plants, most technology and most reclamation plants are producing the highest quality water because technology has got to a point where most of us are producing Class A plus effluent, which is virtually almost potable water. It's very, very clean water. And that water can be, if a package plant is producing Class A plus, it'd be very easy to get an aquifer protection permit, underground storage facility permit by both agencies, and you could actually either inject that through a VADOS injection well or have a basin and put that water in the basin and let it percolate back into the aquifer.
So is that something that we should require then as the town? Is that something you would recommend as these developers? Should we require that type of?
I guess it would come down to, it depends. The old "it depends" question, which is, or response, which is, if they're going to have a package plant, let's say they lease it for 5 years and waiting for the sewer line to come 5 years from now, that might be a huge capital investment for a 5-year throwaway, unless it's going to be used for a longer period of time. If it fits into a capital, I'll say overall master capital plan, where you have multiple recharge areas that are benefiting the town's pumping wells, then maybe it fits into a perfect design to having multiple recharge sites. And that might be very viable. But if it's strictly looking at them having a package plant for a long period of time, then I would say that would be something I would look at with development services planning and zoning, and making those types of requirements to make sure those credits are being earned back by the town. You're replenishing the aquifer, and you're gaining renewable water supplies that can be used in the future.
Okay, you said credits back to the town. One of your slides said, though, the person that owns the plant gets the credit.
Correct. So right now the town we're generating reclaimed water, and we're putting it back in the ground. The state issues a certificate every year of here's how many credits you've earned the last calendar year. It's like a bank account. You made a deposit, here's your new bank slip. Those become the town credits. You own them. You can do whatever you want to with them. You can sell them. You can do direct deliveries, whatever you want. But primarily, that becomes a water supply that you can utilize for existing requirements for growth that you have or new growth. So the previous example of a 50-unit subdivision, you could use those credits and say, we're going to sell these credits to this development. It's a commercial subdivision. We're going to sell credits to this subdivision. You can make them access the portfolio and get those credits. And then we get a certificate utilizing that certificate, those credits. Am I making sense?
No.
Sure.
Maybe step in on this. Just one thing if I may add one thing real quick. I believe technically in the code currently, without any sort of rezoning or development agreements to the contrary, package plants are not allowed per code. But there have been development agreements in the past that council has approved that were for temporary type basis. And as the public works director, what I'd recommend, and I think Mark probably, if there is a case where the town wants to look towards a package plan as an interim solution, there would be a negotiation of who operates that plant and takes ownership of those storage credits as part of the development agreement. And it'd probably be a case-by-case basis, I would think. Does that help?
Because I do know that we have required a package plant to a developer.
There was at least one subdivision, and those development agreements have expired for the particular one I'm thinking of.
We're probably thinking of the same one then. Okay.
So
I'm just thinking,
Yeah, I know it's been talked about in the past, but that would be up to council, and I think all that would be vetted on a case-by-case basis.
So then, we would then need to take over operation of that package plant in order for the town to get the credits
Or address the ownership of the recharge credits in the agreement.
in the agreement.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, if the package plan just comes down to an agreement, if the package plant is, say the town wants the development to own and operate the plant, but in the agreement we get the credits, that's something that can be arranged through development agreement.
Okay,
Yeah.
understand. Thank you.
I think that's probably all our,
Thank you very much.
Cecilia, do you have anything?
Did you feel like you got enough for a little bit of direction on?
I think so. Just maybe to summarize what from maybe Development Services and Public Works, what we are going to be looking to council for is we're getting approached by developers about, we're bringing you the water, we deserve these recharge credits back and things like that. And what we wanted to do is maybe not only teach me, but the council of what we've got going, what laws we have, and maybe some direction from council of, before we get to council matters, staff get direction of what council wants as far as who should be offered some of our portfolio, and should residential be considered versus commercial as far as what they bring to the town, as far as tax base or resources, that sort of thing. Just kind of what council's general policy is on accessing that portfolio, so that we don't waste the time of developers in all the preliminary meetings and that sort of thing, is kind of the direction we're looking for here.
Do you?
Not right now, but in
I
the future.
understand. Do you think it'd be beneficial for us to have like a little mini retreat on this and have Mark there and go over our currents and the pricing and
Yes, I like
all that, and come up with a new, before we get too far into this?
I think so.
Well, there's just a value to all of these, and we don't want to end up giving away the farm and then have every
exactly.
developer in here coming in and going,
Yeah, I agree.
we want this in our development agreement.
And if we don't recharge as much as we can recharge, then we can't continue to do,
Correct.
have the credits for further development, so it's more
Right.
of a, if we stop, we lose. If we go ahead, then
Okay.
that's my.
Then we'll get something scheduled.
Yeah,
and-
let's get
okay.
some, if you will, and come back up and spend some time with us, a
Come
little
back up.
workshop.
Down.
Actually, I came down. I came south
Yeah.
here from my house. I'm up north. Just about 13 miles.
But we're higher than you are, so.
It doesn't matter.
I'm at 48. I think I'm a little bit higher. I'm on the foothills of Feather Mountain in the Big Chino, yeah.
Yeah.
When,
Would you be willing to come down or up or wherever it is?
How about this? We could have the
Come back,
retreat
yeah.
at my house. Food for thought. I do make homemade wine and those kind of great things. So Cecilia knows.
Wow.
when we do that,
Did
I-
you
I
just
would
say
like to see
doo-doo?
different- What's that?
Did you just say doo-doo?
When we do that?
Oh.
I guess I did. Different scenarios of sizes of businesses, from potentially an old home manor, industrial type size, down to say mom and pop, commercial, and then the same thing from small subdivisions on up to large. Some scenarios broke down a little bit.
Are you talking
'Cause I
about like
don't-
how much water use and what a recommendation might be as far as, like, hey, if it's 50 jobs and they're doing this and that we would maybe
that
consider
maybe the town
doing,
would want to then
okay.
carry that, but if it's just a 20-acre subdivision, okay, no, they need to secure their own water credits for that in how the different scenarios may play out.
And it's a recommendation for our per acre foot price for our water portfolio. Since it's
Okay.
204, 205, that's a long time.
And we need to cover all those
All
recommendations
those
you put up.
recommendations that you made.
Shows how development has been dormant here for a while.
One
It
other
hasn't
question I
been
just
an
thought
issue.
of, I'm sorry. The surface runoff, whatever it was, is that what the lakes gives Prescott credit for that? Is that what you mean by that? Is that what that is?
Yes, in-state water supplies, it could be the surface water supplies, so whether it's Watson Willow or it's Salt River or it's other river systems, that's in-state water supplies.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. And I think some of the things that would be beneficial too in this, this next meeting we have is talking about development that does not require a certificate of assured water supply. For example, I'll give you a clear example, a big, large apartment complex. It could be one giant, let's say it's 100 acres and it's many, many units. That's considered one lot. It's a commercial connection. If the town is so inclined to allow them, that would not require an assured water supply. I think it's good to know what requires a assured water supply and what does not.
Yeah, but
I
what
think
kind of
that-
fee would you charge for an apartment versus a?
Right, these are all kind of really good questions. Yep. Great.
Wow.
Thank you.
Thank you for your
Mike.
feedback.
Yeah.
Appreciate it. Thank
Look-
you.
Look forward to spending some time
Thank you.
discussing this, after everybody comes back. Okay. Mike, you're gonna be gone too.
Yes.
Okay, let's go on to the second item, if I can find it.
Education.
Presentation and discussion regarding code compliance regulations, directions, and priorities for the coming fiscal year. Mr. Sanks, how are you this evening?
Very well, thank you, Mayor and Councilman. Just trying to get my mouse to work. I don't know if it went to sleep or the battery died. There we go. If you can click on code compliance, I can use the clicker, the arrows. Perfect. And if you don't mind starting the slideshow at the top.
You can skip to the last one if you
Keep
want.
going to the right. I'm gonna be quick, I promise. Oh, it's over to the right. Keep going to the right
Ignore
where it looks
Jack,
like a
will you
screen.
please?
I'm sorry, I snorted, but I didn't say doo-doo.
Sorry about that. Okay.
You do-
This is just to start off just kind of verbally without on the slides, but as you recall, we had the second session of our strategic planning meeting. All of the department heads and the council were all together, and we discussed issues facing development services, in particular code compliance, and then generally speaking, issues facing the town that are oftentimes quite visible in regards to property maintenance. That is both with weed and long grass mowing, garbage collection. And then it kind of led into a discussion on zoning use violations, illegal uses of property, et cetera, and we kind of discussed, a wide range of issues and how right now, we wanted to come back to the council at that strategic planning session and talk about what are the council's priorities, more or less the town's priorities. Of course, you represent the whole town. And we discussed how our big focus has really been on residential compliance. We presented at the time some stats about how much we were spending on, responses to weeds. People hate tumbleweeds flying around their yards. So they call on their large lot neighbor who doesn't mow. And then we got into more what's happening with businesses along the 89. I think there's kind of a perception that things have been sliding for some time. Our properties are starting to look less well kept, and things are just starting to grow out of a lack of maybe compliance. And we responded with the fact that we have just one code compliance officer, and everything is more reactionary. If something's flagrant or in our face, we'll respond proactively. If I see something, or the code compliance officer, anybody will issue a citation. But he's at capacity, as we've discussed. And so we were advised, come up with a plan, perhaps look at adding an additional compliance officer, and then let's just talk about all the subjects at hand. So I prepared a PowerPoint presentation to kind of go through the several criteria or ideas that we've had to kind of put together justification perhaps for a new compliance officer, as well as what we intend to tackle. So you've seen this just recently. I did a kind of a permits and compliance update, but the slide's still relevant. So in Q4 2017, we had 30 new cases come up, which resulted in the breakdown of about 70% were related to weeds and getting things mowed, people doing outdoor storage, and then other miscellaneous. And things have kind of shifted into 2018. The grass isn't growing quite as fast. It's kind of dormant. And then we had a lot more stuff with outdoor storage and what we call miscellaneous, which could be a variety of cases. I mean, it could be zoning use violations. It could be storage container boxes. It could be all kinds of stuff. So we're seeing it become more diverse, and we're getting more calls.
We have monsoon coming up. What's gonna happen to the weeds?
They're going to grow fast.
Quadruple, so
And-
maybe, how do we prepare for that?
And I think what we're going to see, and certainly we anticipated, it's routine every year. The grass starts growing like crazy. The tumbleweeds are blowing around. We'll hit monsoons and things will be blowing all over the place. And so our current code compliance officer will be out in full force trying to get people to mow. And we've discussed too, and I'll get into it, how we address weeds specifically, if we can do something more like a compromise on how we enforce weed abatement. So the primary discussion points for today, we have about 5. This has come up before, is, should we or is there funding for abatement of vacant property? And this is when you have absentee landowners, but you have property that's kind of getting out of control. You're getting complaints. It's oftentimes neighbor-driven, calling in complaints because it's a property nuisance or it's a public life safety hazard. We just had the big fire. If we have weeds growing like crazy all over the place and it catches fire and you live next to a vacant field that's not being kept, is that a safety issue for your own home? Are you worried about it burning because they're not keeping the weeds down? We also have debris violators. These are people that, unfortunately, we don't have a municipal trash collection system. Not everybody pays to have their trash picked up. They oftentimes collect, oddly enough, dozens of trash bags in their property, or they have unwanted couches or pieces of property that lay around and become a nuisance, and not just a safety hazard or a nuisance from, it's a aesthetic nuisance, but it actually can generate rats and mice and other things that can bother their neighbors, and it's not sanitary. So we'll talk about our ideas for the debris violators and a potential voucher program. I know that kind of sounds alarm bells, but we'll get more into our ideas in a moment. We also talked about weed abatement. Do we want weed abatement on every property? Do we want 1 acre properties that have long weeds, or do we want to focus on a size threshold to kind of narrow that down? And then how would we go about abating weeds? Is it just, do we want the whole property mowed, or would we want to do just like a mow strip around the property to be more reasonable? We've been discussing that, and we'll show you our ideas. We've talked about the addition of a second code compliance officer focused on commercial properties, since right now David's 100% consumed with residential as it is, and like you said, we're not even in monsoon season. And then we're also looking at how quickly we can improve and enforce our code compliance through maybe moving out of the court system altogether and going back to the way we used to do things. And not exactly sure why we changed in the past, but we do have the ability to change to a more administrative system with the hearing officer and only escalate the most grave of things that are unresolved into the criminal system if we need to get to that point, rather than have everything logged up in the courts, which have their own way of doing due process, which can be very time consuming, and it can take us a very long time to get things fixed. So in regards to funding for abatement of vacant properties, we wanted to kind of identify how many do we really have. We want to quantify this so we're not just throwing it out there saying we have a problem with abatement on vacant properties. So last year, more or less, we had 15 vacant properties in which we received no response from property owners in regards to complaints about their properties, whether it's weeds and garbage, or just garbage. But most of it's weeds and grass growing too long. So we can't find the owner, they don't respond, and so we can't get them to fix the problem. But we have a public safety or nuisance issue, and so we feel obligated as a town to do something to correct it. So we did call, and we are aware that it costs about $100 an acre to have the mowing service go out and mow weeds. Oftentimes they have a 1 acre minimum, so they won't go out for like really tiny jobs, but they'll go out if it's at least an acre. We're working on that now to kind of get an idea of the cost, but we did estimate that it would cost about $5,000 more or less a year if we were to go out and actively abate all of the weed problems from people that do not respond to our citations. So that said, we don't know how much garbage abatement costs would be. We've only really had a couple severe cases of garbage that's not being collected, that's creating a nuisance. So we're trying to find contractors that actually want to go on someone's property and collect all their garbage and throw it away for them, so that we can fix these problems. A lot of times these are people will rent a property, accumulate a whole bunch of garbage, not mow their weeds, and then they'll just leave because they were renters, and then we can't find the owner, or they're non-responsive. But we need to take care of the problem. So this is really, we're going to get the cost estimates for this, but we really, like I said, have only had a couple. So most of it's going to be weed abatement. And ultimately the cost recovery for this, if we were to front the money, if you will, to take care of these problems and maintain our town, we would do it through leaning the properties. And so if we had an owner that did finally come back and say, hey, you went out and took care of all this mess, they finally become responsive, they would be responsible for not only paying the fines on the property, but the liens for the abatement. But what we need from council would be direction on if we should go ahead and allocate funding in the approximate amount of around $5,000 a year to abate these properties, rather than just let them sit in perpetuity unabated, if we find it to be a nuisance. And then we're getting these, as I have said, this is complaint driven. These are neighbors complaining that they have a nuisance next door.
I get several complaints a month about garbage and weeds and trash. I would like to see some money assigned to this so we can take care of it, at least get it knocked down to some reasonable level.
Jason, I'm just curious on this. This is, the 5,000 is what you're thinking. Is that only what you guys are considering for, just for vacant properties or for any property?
This
where-
is just the vacant properties. We have a little bit of a funding issue related to active property owners engaging with us that are not financially secure to actually abate their own properties, and then we can talk about that. These are for absentee owners. We can't find them, and we don't want to sit and live with the problem indefinitely. So we can become active in actually doing the abatement ourselves, and then charging them back through liens.
Jason, are these 15 vacant properties, are they house lots or are they acreage?
They could be both.
But you don't have a
Off the top of my head, I don't know if you recall, Joanne. I have Joanne here. She's kind of my little SME on this.
more just house lots? Right.
So, and I will remind everyone, of course, there's a process that precedes abatement and leaning. We don't just wantonly, we tried to call and couldn't get a hold of them. It takes 30, sometimes 60 days before we get to the point where we have to do something because of the issue. Again, it all is based not just on aesthetics, but, public safety and those sorts of things.
What's your pleasure?
So go to the slide before this one. We kind of need to establish what's in violation and what isn't first. Are we going to go with 6 inches, 12 inches, 24 inches? We need to establish what's in violation first.
I believe, Councilmember Mendoza, we have established standards to some degree, or do we just respond if it's like knee-high or it's time to go? Yeah.
I also know in our meeting the last time that we're actually going to possibly seasonal for that as well. That during the monsoon period, this is a rural area. Everyone says, "Oh, we like the rural. We don't want it to change." Well, weeds come with rural, so we're then not only going to pick what is unreasonable or the violation limit, but we're also now going to inject a time frame, basically based around monsoon,
Right.
and you have X amount of time after monsoons to get cleaned up.
I think, Councilmember Mendoza, we can certainly look at that. I think when we're looking at the life safety issue of it, whether it's August or if it's December, I'm not sure if there's a fire danger when you're adjacent to the property. What we wanted to discuss with you today as a discussion point was, should we maybe look at some more reasonable measures where property owners can do perhaps a 10 or 20-foot mow strip adjacent to existing residences or existing neighborhoods as a protection mechanism, but not necessarily make them mow their entire property. But they do have a maintenance obligation to not actually represent a potential danger to their neighbors, whether they have the property developed or not. And we also looked at property thresholds. We addressed, what about properties on the 89 and the weeds there too? Are we concerned about the person that drives on the 89 and flicks their cigarette butt out, and we have 3-foot tall grass right off the highway? Should we institute a larger mow strip requirement for those property owners, maybe like, let's say 50 feet, to help negate the concern of danger of a fire? It's really, a lot of it's fire. It's not just I really hate my neighbor's tumbleweeds on my front porch, but are we concerned about the fire danger?
I think it was very obvious. I think we all watched the news this last week, and when you see the aerial of the viewpoint in Quito Valley, you can see the homes that had their defensible space on their property. They were proactive with their own property. You can't blame the state, the state land that abutted theirs. A lot of it is personal responsibility as well. But again, we're going back to what is then the required, say if we do require a perimeter mowing, at what point? We
At what
still
time?
have to have a measurable, a quantifiable way to determine it.
And Councilmember Mendoza and Mayor as well, we can establish that through the property maintenance ordinance that's actually floating in there, out there right now. We're working with Andrew on it. We can establish a grass height, and we can also establish the mow strips if you're interested in going down that road. All of those can be quantified. And we can also define what, on the 89, maybe we need more of a mow strip, and then outside of that, then maybe not so much. But just because of the, we have nearly 30,000 traffic trips a day on the 89, which represent a potential hazard for high grass next to it.
Yeah, I do support everything that you're saying. Now go ahead and come back up to the next one, if you would. I'm sorry, one too many.
There we go.
Cost recovery can be accomplished through property liens. I have no problem going to that extent, with making, some people you just have to force them to be responsible. And if it means going to that point, well then so be it.
I think we need to discuss as well, for property owners that are actively engaged with us, they're completely aware of the problem, at what point we would go to a lien versus going into prosecution. I think that's one thing we'll need to discover, because we've been talking more about how do we help the known violators that were engaging with us. Let's say they have a trash problem on their property, they have no financial resources to, or they have lack of financial resources to pay for trash pickup, or they choose not to. It's either way. We'll get to that too. At what point we lien them as well, we can get some direction. And I think a policy direction from council would be good for policy on that. Like, to what extent do we go at 60? Do we go at 90 days? But an absentee owner is not engaging with us, so I think we set a time frame of about 60 days. At some point, we just can't find them, or they're non-responsive, and we move forward. Active owners, we think we need to do it maybe slightly differently.
Yeah, okay. Am I okay? I'm fine. How are you?
Is he weird?
Jack.
It's Jack, I'm sorry. Yeah.
Was
go
that
ahead.
directed at
I
staff?
think it's a great idea. Let's move on.
Thank you. All right.
I'm sorry I asked Jack.
So that would be, that's again, abatement of vacant properties right now. And we can talk about how we go towards leaning or prosecution if it needs to get there with non-vacant properties. So the second one we've had problems with are the debris violators, if we can call it that. In general, just garbage. And it also can be weeds on property, or both. Oftentimes they kind of come together. We have talked about trying to find a program that's cost reasonable, that can be effective. As you know, we do have the biannual cleanup campaign where we bring the big giant dumpsters, and they can come down and just show us that they're a Chino Valley resident, that they're not outside of the city limits, and then just dump their unwanted couches and bags of garbage or whatever it is. But as part of that, we could think of as getting kind of ahead of it, or these people that don't really have the means to get rid of their garbage. Garbage dump off at the Paulton landfill is pretty cheap. You can really dump a lot of garbage for $10, up to $15. You can get rid of a lot of stuff. If we have real garbage violators, when we issue the citation, we could consider offering them information on how to receive we just came up with the term, a $15 voucher, if you will. We can coordinate with Paulton Landfill to create the voucher program, so that if somebody goes and they drop off 500 pounds of garbage and it's $10, we could direct pay that $10 as part of the program as a one-time assistance for people. Most people that are financially able to are likely paying for trash pickup service. So what we have is we found is a lot of people that are not in that position accumulate garbage. And if, do we want to help settle the nuisance problem and offer that to them? It's something to consider. And that's what we've seen other jurisdictions, I believe, that particularly Joanne and others have worked in, that have offered that to help get in front of the garbage problem and not wait to do it 2 times a year and hope that they bring it down to where we have the dumpster bins. But I know there's always a little pushback. Do we really want to push town money out there for people that are making a mess? And are we kind of almost contributing to the problem? Are we creating willful willful violators of the code? Something to consider as a discussion point. But we'd offered that. We can establish that program, and we could actually we thought of the people that we've had in the last year, calculating it up. It could be up to $3,000 a year based on the number of violators we've had, and that could come out of the cleanup campaign or be added to it, actually, if we wanted to go there to try to get ahead of the problem. That was our estimate based on the number of garbage debris violators we had last
Do
year.
you have any idea how many of these violators have a vehicle they could haul the garbage off with? Or
We had this conversation, Mayor, and
Because
council.
a voucher won't be any good if you can't get it there.
Not unless we give them a voucher and a truck. I know.
Yeah,
We did
yeah.
talk about it. Funny enough, David Jaime, our code compliance officer, said it's interesting. He'll go to oftentimes with the residences, though somebody will have a truck in the driveway that looks like it's operational, yet they have a ton of garbage. They're just not taking it to. Maybe they don't know how cheap it is to dump at Paulden. Maybe they don't care. Some people just don't care, and then we end up going down the prosecution way. But this is kind of like the first soft step before we kind of hard nose some of these properties into compliance, if you will. So that's kind of what we're thinking. But we set it at a maximum based on the number of, if they all took advantage of this program, it wouldn't cost us anything if they didn't use the voucher. The voucher only costs us if they actually got the garbage out of there and took it to the landfill, which I think is accomplishing, at least on staff's terms, the objective of reducing the amount of on-property trash nuisances.
What do you think of a 1-year cleanup Chino campaign kind of deal?
Yeah.
I know that we have, because some of our one-time construction tax monies that we have right now, that we're not counting on them year after year,
Right.
and possibly do a 1-year campaign that we do the big roll-offs, and we do these periodically through a 1-year, every couple months. And now, at the end of that year, then it becomes the hard nose. You've had the opportunity, and if people are slobs, and they'll resort back, and then we got to take care of them. But
I like to
think as
tab
a-
on that.
Go ahead.
I think also, instead of having a central location for the dumpsters on the cleanup day, what if we went to the neighborhoods themselves
Yes.
with the dumpsters on the truck and a loader or a backhoe or something? Just an idea.
If I may, Mayor and Councilmember Miller, I know that Joanne's worked on this. I think we've actually talked about it. Our concern was the logistics of doing so, but I'd have to talk to, we've discussed this.
We have, and I've done this.
Joanne, why don't you come up front, please?
You just said the mic catches you.
No, yeah.
See you in the minutes.
We've done this type of a program in my previous environment, and it worked 50-50.
Joanne, move the mic over. You're being recorded in it.
What had happened is there was more garbage dumped on site than they would fit in the bins. It took more cleanup time to pick those roll-offs up and dump them to the dump instead of doing this big dump cleanup like we do twice a year here. We also got to the point where when the roll-offs were picked up, people still dumped. We got to the point where we then had certain sections throughout the town, several weeks, and left these roll-offs there and would change them out. That seemed to work a little bit better, leaving them in one spot for over a month, changing them out, then putting them in the neighborhoods, because the garbage that they would dump would usually be at night, and most of it was not in bags or boxes. Mattresses, they'd leave them in the road. They wouldn't even put them in the dumpsters. A lot of the things that they're bringing, they can't lift. They just open the tailgate and push it off. So a lot of the neighborhoods after the first run did not want to do it any longer. Plus, the Streets and Parks Department were cleaning up a big mess over a long period of time.
Chino actually did that as well at one time out at Old Home Manor.
And how'd that work?
It was horrendous. The amount that got piled out there was just,
Yeah, putting it one area for a month or so, that worked a little bit better.
I think
in one area.
I think part of what we're doing with this is that we control the site, because we're on site when the dumping is occurring, and we make sure to manage that it gets into the dumpsters rather than piles of trash that could also be blowing around and going to the neighborhoods nearby. I agree. You asked if you could have some sort of a loader that's actively, more or less, you're saying, let's do municipal trash pickup a couple times a year rather than weekly like some jurisdictions do.
Yeah, just like pick a neighborhood, like say Chino Meadows 1. We're gonna hit it this weekend or whatever.
I
And
think we
have
have
it
to
more, not dropping the dumpster on the ground, but have it more house to house. If you have something, flag us down.
Councilmember Miller, in most cities do bulk trash pickup twice a year or quarterly. and they send you in your water bill the notice that, hey, they're coming to pick up your big old television or whatever. I just don't know how much funding that would require. I think we would need to vet
I
that.
don't
think
either.
it's
I
a
would
great
just throwing
question.
out an idea for the non-mobile people.
Yeah,
that are
or
out
we
there.
could even, and we could also talk about the ones that are violating, and that we could figure out if a way to assess that they simply are completely immobile. Do we have a service where those isolated people we deal with separately, as opposed to just having more or less, like you said, a municipal trash pickup system twice a year? We could do that for people that are identified.
Even
Perhaps I'm
adult-
elderly, or I don't have a vehicle.
Even
I
a
don't know
dump
anybody with a
truck or
truck.
something.
We could probably look at that. That would be something that would require Frank as well and I to sit down and talk about what public works facilities
Again, that
we
was
have.
just an idea.
I think it's a great idea, because then you're really getting to the problems for the people that can't help themselves. Do we go fix the nuisance and do it
And this would be-
collaboratively and not
Yes.
like
And
punitively?
I'm talking about a one-time thing. Get them caught up, and then, okay, now it's up to you to maintain. Not, we're going to be back in 6 months and do this again
Right.
for you.
The county offers, I think they're doing it 4 times a month to twice a year. So the county offers a cleanup program, then we offer 2. They still don't take this into consideration because they don't have the vehicle to bring the garbage to the dump. So what I found at this last cleanup is a couple of the neighbors would go house to house with their pickup trucks and their trailers and say, if you have anything, we'll take it to the town cleanup for you. And that worked. This gentleman was there, I don't know how many times, 30 times in 2 days, picking up the neighbor's garbage. So we might think of something like that during this cleanup by
Yeah.
having a couple trucks, city trucks with trailers and offering to go pick it up for them.
Sure. That's what I was thinking,
Something
just
like
something to
that.
handle the non-mobile people.
I think, considering have been in contact with many of these people through the kind of the citation process, we do speak to them oftentimes face to face. David's very active in the community and tries to work with people. Again, we're always trying to be collaborative and not heavy-handed. And then sometimes we have to become heavy-handed because it's just our duty to do so, to get the job done.
Right.
But maybe we could come up, I think we'll explore that, and we'll come back to you with maybe a follow-up, how we could go about doing that
Okay.
for the, and this, we're talking about the
I
one-offs
was
here. This is
thinking
not
mo-
the regular, so we could probably manage that.
I was thinking much more frequent, through a year's period.
We certainly
Not
could.
just, twice, throughout the year, but no, a more frequent, and yeah, you show up with 4 dumpsters and, okay, today is one of those dates, in 2 weeks we'll be back, and you have people monitoring them, they get picked up at the end of the day, and then off they go. You have people there. And then it's definitely our police department that this isn't a dump site for people just keep piling on the ground. But you let people know they're gonna be back in 2 weeks. So don't dump on the ground. We'll be back. And we're gonna be here every 2 weeks for a year's period. So everybody will have opportunity to get it done.
And Mayor and Councilmember Mendoza, I think right now we know the 2 cleanup days cost us about nearly $30,000 in a fiscal year. If we were to change the program and expand upon that, we may need to look at the budgetary requirements to kind of pull that off. Staff is a bit of a fixed cost, although, because we're already here, but I'm not certain in terms of the actual pickup and logistics, what other costs may be associated. But I think we should go down that road if that's where you'd like. We can get some ideas. If we're getting more trash out of the town, we're accomplishing the goal. It's just, are we able to pay
Look at
for
a
it?
quarterly pickup like that
Okay.
and see what the costs are and what kind of manpower, womenpower that you have to have.
And
If I make a comment, just, of course, Public Works and all of staff works at direction of council, and we have a nice thing in our job description, say other duties is assigned, so we're happy to work according to the council. But if it's a concentrated campaign for like a 1 year period or something, I may recommend that we look more towards a contract basis so that we don't harm
Yes.
other services. But if it's a more spaced out thing, that would maybe be more appropriate for town staff. Those sorts of things to consider.
No, I think you hit that nail on the head.
I had one question that might, and maybe you're gonna get there eventually. I know in California where I live, they had a home beautification program, and they awarded, cash awards. And the town at the time was divided up into 4 locations, northeast and what have you. And people started taking pride in their home. They would go ahead and keep it clean. They'd go ahead and plant flowers. And here we want them to plant rocks, but to go ahead and beautify it. And then, so they put the responsibility back on them to have their home. And I've talked to Cecilia about maybe doing a program like that. And then also Ken at Waters Gardener. They would go ahead and be happy to go ahead and give you a voucher for flowers or something if you were one of the winners. So, I mean, I think there's an incentive way we could go to have people want their places to look better.
I think the incentive is you clean up your yard or you're gonna get a ticket.
And Mayor and Councilmember Best, I think what we're talking about is almost the opposite side of the spectrum, and that is for those that take exceptional care of their homes, that we're recognizing them in the community. And I think if we were talking about taking a less exceptional home and having a program kind of a before and after, we could also look at that, like for people that, have really made the investment. Here I feel, with the trash pickup and the garbage abatement, we're looking at assisting those that are the perhaps worst offenders in the community. But I think that that's a great program. I've seen them. I've grown up in communities where people pride themselves on getting that sign out in the front of their house for the month.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's kind of where we're at. I appreciate all of the direction. I think what we'll need to do is kind of collect all this and then come back to you for another one of these study sessions. And this will be specifically in relationship to the debris violators. Those are people that we're talking to. So that's our second point, and thank you again. Right now, what we would like to also kind of go into is we did discuss this at the strategic session about the concept of adding an additional code compliance officer. It's not uncommon for a town of our size to have more than just one. The towns that are a fourth of our size that have one, let alone at our size. And we have a lot of older housing stock and older communities as well that have had plenty of time to collect compliance issues. So what we've really seen is that we've seen the highway frontage, and I've heard this numerous times, is it, again, like I said earlier, we feel like we're slipping a little bit. There's just more stuff keeps popping up. I've seen stuff in the last 9 months that have popped up that wasn't there 9 months ago. And we're working on it, and we have our code compliance officer issuing citations. We have people wheeling out used appliances in front of properties that aren't supposed to have anything out front. We have people with lots of illegal tattered signs that don't ever have permits for them. A number of items. And so with our current officer at capacity, really, more than capacity, just with residential properties, we'd like to see, and with council support, a second staff person come on. But we would like to say, with the caveat you'll see here, we would like to explore this position as a temporary 1-year position. Maybe we'll see if it works as a shot in the arm, and maybe that's all we need, or maybe we come back for the next budget cycle and say, I think we need to continue on and maybe do another year or make it a permanent position. It's not just recognizing the problem, it's the significant amount of follow-up that occurs with working and negotiating with these business owners and property owners to actually rectify the problem.
Let's give it a try.
Sound so?
Yes, absolutely. Because what I recognize here is that since we're not proactive on this and everything's reactionary, it just, and we have issues right now where people just have kept pushing the bar till now they are completely out of compliance, that they're using properties that they're not even zoned for. But because they've been easing that direction for so long, and we haven't had any compliance, officers to say, hey, stop right there. Some of them are now some serious problems.
And Mayor and Council, as you know, on top of all of this, with the same level of staff that we have, we're also experiencing a significant uptick in new development. And even businesses that are already in place are expanding on site. And so we're seeing lots and lots of moving parts, and the additional staff member would be helpful to focus on this. And again, too, you find the other part that happens is you have, a few businesses that are doing violations, and then the next business thinks, well, I can violate because everybody else is. And they start to spread like contagion. And so we're trying to get on top of it so we can keep the town attractive. I would like to say two things. We've addressed the issue with the 1-year position as temporary. We'll look at it next fiscal year for ongoing. But we would like to see their hours be slightly different, especially focusing on commercial. There's a lot of people that like to pop up a table on the side of the road or the corner of a parking lot and sell stuff out of a van, and it's not really allowed. I mean, it happens, but it's not just that. It's the people that do a lot of violations on the weekends because they know that we are not open.
Yes.
So we'd like to see hours extended at least to Saturday, and maybe not Sunday, but maybe a Tuesday through Saturday, or even a Wednesday through Saturday. You know, there'd be either 5/8s or 4/10s, whatever. That would help us cover that. To keep the position as an attractive position to fill it, we'd like to leave Sunday off, but we could even look at a Sunday schedule if we needed to. Certainly, we have the need for it, so that's what we're looking at.
Press on.
All right. Last thing we talked about is shifting our process to administrative the way we used to do it. We'd like to pull this process out of the court system, which has its own statutory requirements and how they process things, how you cite people, how you process citations and pay for them. It's been kind of cumbersome. Nothing against, by any means, our own courts. It's really what's kind of passed through statutory requirements that's creating the very cumbersome process. We can't react quickly to solving these problems, and things string out for up to even 6 months. And then when things switch over to prosecution, sometimes it even gives them they start the clock over, like, okay, now it's in the court's hands, and well, we need to give you a chance to rectify the problem. They don't just issue some sort of a settlement on the first day it gets to the courts. By the time it finally gets into prosecution, they start it over, and this can go on forever.
Do we have a program that we can model after, or you can present to the council? The process?
Mayor and council, yes, we do. We have it would become an administrative process, and we'd appoint a hearing officer, and it would go through that process much more quickly. A lot of jurisdictions already use this. We used to use it in years past. At some point, it went back into the courts. I'm not exactly sure the history with that, but we can go back out of it, and legally, we're allowed to do so. And so that will help us. Like when we say you've got 2 weeks, there's 2 weeks. And then at some point, we can start assessing fines.
Okay. Let's take a look at it and see what you have.
Okay.
And Andrew is, at this point, looking into the process, and he feels that this is a better way to go.
Okay.
So,
Who's Andrew?
Andrew is
Attorney.
our new
The
legal
attorney.
counsel.
Oh,
Same firm, new face.
Okay.
Actually, an old face coming back. He used to be the town
I'm sorry.
town
I didn't
attorney in the
click-
early
I didn't
2000s.
click 2 and 2. That's about the third time I've heard his name.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Yes. Our town
He's
attorney.
used to Phyllis.
We can call him Phyllis. He doesn't like it.
Counsel, that's all I had. I'm happy to
I'm
answer
assuming he
questions.
would bring that to us as far as what the
Yeah.
progression of violation would be, and time limits that correspond with that.
a lot of it's state regulated. We have to go by state statute.
Mhm.
So we have to follow not only our ordinance, but state statute. Basically, we have to follow our rules.
So we're not taking it out of the legal system. We're still having to adhere to state, so it's not just adjusting our town code to this. We're still adopting ARS code.
See, Andrew will reconcile statutory requirements with the process that works for us as well in terms of scheduling and how much time. We won't be more overly zealous than we can be by state statute requirements. And then we'll go through the process and how we cite and how we administer hearings through the hearing officer.
Is the hearing officer going to be a new position or just somebody within staff?
Somebody
That's
within staff.
Staff.
Oftentimes, Councilmember Miller, it would be perhaps a member of the police department, but it doesn't have to be. We could have
Okay.
somebody else. I mean, and these, again, it only escalates to the hearing officer if they don't comply with the citation.
Got it.
We can get a retired fireman to go ahead and be a hearing officer.
You could. Not this one, but you could.
Can I just summarize what
No.
you guys might?
Jack wants to do his part.
So what I think I am hearing you say is that for residential especially, you want some kind of cleanup campaign that we would really push out there for the next year. So we can come up with some ideas on what that might look like and how often we would be in the neighborhoods. We probably need to tighten down a little bit on what our standards are so that we can make sure that we're consistently applying what is a weedy property. And then we're going to look at hiring somebody that would probably focus a little bit more on the commercial side, and then that person would help us develop, I think you were talking about having some standards even from the highway standpoint that we could say cleaning up the campaign along the highway, that those standards might be a little different than what we would see farther off the highway, so that whether it's signage or weeds, et cetera, kind of clean it up.
We have a hot list, short list of items that we'd like to address from a code complaint standpoint on the 89, which are somewhat separate than the typical residential, which is the vast majority of property that's not on the 89. I would also like to suggest as well, when we're looking at the commercial cleanup, we are looking at a kind of a soft touch campaign to get the word out. And I noticed that the Chino Valley Review's here, about how we can, about how we can at some point allow commercial businesses to understand, like, these are the very often the frequent violations, and if you're in violation, we're kind of letting you know now, and then things will slide into warnings and citations and
Right.
enforcement. So
Just letting them know what the ordinances are. might
yeah,
help.
sometimes people don't even know
They don't-
that
they
they're
don't
in
know what-
violation.
they
So
don't know
we don't
what
want it
they're
to look like,
violating.
again, a hammer type campaign.
Yeah, I agree.
But with getting the communication out there that this is a 1-year campaign, this is your opportunity.
Clean
And
up.
we're here to help you.
Right, so
Yeah,
there'll be
we're
a
from
pretty
the
high level
government.
of education at the same time,
But-
especially on the commercial corridor.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
There's
if
a lot
you
of
don't-
visual
if
noise.
you don't
in the
take
corridor.
advantage of it, and as part of the communication, that come that following year, now you're going to be held responsible. So
If we have a quorum, Jack, you could probably do the final.
You ready?
Yeah.
I make a motion we adjourn.
I second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
We're adjourned.
Didn't ask for opposed.
Hope you were done, Jason.
Nobody would dare oppose that. No. No. Okay, Flash, be careful on the grip.